Sometimes we get stuck. We don't know where to go or what to do. We start to use words like I don't know or I can't. And people will come along beside us and go, okay, what we need to do is get you to think big. You need to really engage something inside of you and think big. And they'll ask us to think like, what would you do if you had all the money in the world? Or what would you do if there were no limits? The truth is, you will never have all the money in the world. And if you got all the money in the world, what would happen is we'd come take a bunch of it from you. That's how that would work. And of course, there are limits, and there always will be. That's not good big thinking, because it forgets that we also have to be able to think small. And sometimes that's all people want us to do. They're just like, you got to be realistic. You got to get your feet on the ground. Quit dreaming so big. And they just want us to think small, be practical. I think one of the ways to think really well, especially about the future and goal setting, is to think big and think small simultaneously. Can you do them both? You have to think, you want to think when goal setting, when going after new things, you want to be able to think into your imagination. You actually cannot think beyond it. So you want to think into it, maybe even to the edge of what you can actually imagine. Not what you've been told you should imagine, what you can actually imagine. That comes from inside. But at the same time, you have to be able to think about small next steps. And those next steps often need to be way smaller than you think. When people say the first step's the hardest, I'm like, why is that the case? That doesn't make any sense. The first step literally should be the easiest. It's like, I'm here. I'm going to take this little tiny step that almost nobody's going to recognize I even took. I'm going to get a little tiny bit of feedback out of that and figure out if I should take the next little step. And if it all goes wrong, the consequences are really low. And all I have to do is take a little step back and I'm right back where I started. The first step is literally the easiest, unless you've made it too big. Can you think big and simultaneously think small? Now, big things are sometimes really impressive, and accomplishing them is very noticeable, and that's great. But sometimes what we want is to be impressive or be significant, and so we are only thinking about and only talking about these big steps, these big journeys that we want to go on, but we forget that we have to do all the little bits along the way, and that's where all the heart is, right? That's we say it's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the leather pounds the pavement. Those little tiny steps are super important. And if you string enough of them together, you build momentum. And momentum is motion's best friend. It's how things really get moving. 2022 is right around the corner. It's just right there waiting for us. And I think for many people, it could be one of their best years ever. For many people, it's going to have some real struggles in it, but it is worth engaging those struggles. It is worthwhile to set goals for 2022. But to do that, you have to think big about your goals. You've got to stretch yourself into your imagination. That's where the motive is revealed. That's where intrinsic motivation will emerge. And intrinsic motivation is powerful stuff. It's the stuff that'll get you up in the morning without somebody having to punish you or reward you. Those are fine, but they're all external motives. Intrinsic motivation is a thing that will get you up because you want to. And that is work worth doing. When you're getting up and engaging the world because you want to, you're doing something that's bringing meaning and purpose to your life and hopefully to those around you. And that's the kind of work we're all looking for, or at least a lot of us are. Intrinsic motivation is the difference between the hardship, the cost, and even the suffering of life being punishment or sacrifice. You can't get rid of the hard. You can't get rid of the cost. And you probably can't get rid of most of this. Well, not most, some of the suffering of life. Definitely not most. Most of the suffering in life is probably unnecessary. But some of it is. In fact, one author says, I think Carl Jung wrote this originally, says that something like 90% of all the suffering in the world is unnecessary and 10% of it is necessary. And the 10% is caused by those of us that are trying to avoid, the 90% of the unnecessary suffering is caused when we try to avoid the 10% that is necessary. I like that framework. I think the numbers are just there to help us understand the scale. There is a cost to going after what you want. The difference is, will it be punishment or sacrifice? Hardship that's worth it. And that's intrinsic motivation. That's what thinking big is for. It's to engage the intrinsic motivation that'll get us up in the morning to do work that matters. But thinking small is equally necessary. And here's how we like to think about thinking small. You want to think so small, such tiny steps, that the next step is within what we call your activatable resources. And your activatable resources are your time, your money you can access, credit lines, borrowing, what money you can access. So your time, your money, and your attention. Those are your activatable resources. And what you want to do is think so small that you're thinking within the amount of those that you have right now, and then take a step that fits within those. Because you don't have to ask permission. You already have the permission to do those things. It's your time, your money, and your attention. And if you design steps that are within those, you can just go do them. In fact, you could do it right now. In fact, the thing that you want in life, that thing that emanates from within you, that is that big, impressive dream, you could take the next step right now if the next step fits within your activatable resources. And if you do that step, you'll learn. You'll learn all kinds of stuff. It doesn't even matter what happens. You'll learn. And then you'll take the next step and the next step and the next step. And all those little steps over time build your activatable resources, which allows you to take some bigger steps and some bigger steps. 2022 is right around the corner, and there's opportunity in it for everyone if they're willing to think big and think small simultaneously. Thanks.